I remember very keenly talking to my parents, right before going into surgery. I remember looking over to them, and I remember telling them, um, that, excuse me. I remember telling them that no matter what happens, that I will always love them. So it's 2015. It's finals week in college, and my parents tell me that my great grandmother had passed away, and we had to go from here in North Carolina to Nebraska. Um, and on the way there, we have a layover flight in between Atlanta. The only thing that I really remember is eating like a Papa Seed muffin from the airport because it was really delicious. But I'm told that like when we landed in Atlanta, I had stood up to grab my laptop from the overhead compartment, and when I grabbed it, I had collapsed onto the ground. And my dad had thought that my knees had buckled, and so he, pushes me, or or not pushes me, but like, nudges me and says, "All right, Nathan, come on, get up. It's time to get up." But I'm not moving. I'm unresponsive at the time, and it was at that point that he started to realize that something was wrong. That I wasn't conscious at the time. Very fortunately, there were 3 people there that were CPR certified, and one of them was a nurse. And they resuscitated me, and they provided, the nurse checked my pulse, found out that I had an elevated pulse, and grabbed what was called an AID. And I don't even know if they have one on this plane. But what an AED is, it's a little box that has leads that come out of it that you can place on your on a chest, and it will sense the heart rate of a person and determine whether or not to deliver a shock. And what they had found after they had placed it on me is that I was having a cardiac arrest. It's not the same as a heart attack, but cardiac arrest can lead to a heart attack. What was essentially happening is that my heart was pumping so fast that there wasn't any oxygen going to my head, and I passed out as a result. And if I had if left prolonged, it would eventually lead to a heart attack, or it could eventually lead to a heart attack, but it would eventually lead to death. So they placed it on me, and it had decided to shock me. And it was at this point that my sister was on the phone with my mother, and she was, apparently absolutely frantic, and she's hyperventilating, talking to my mother, and she says, we think that Nathan, we think that he and my dad apparently interrupted and said, we don't know anything, hang up the phone, we'll call her later. Personally, what was going through my mind was, do I have some sort of undiagnosed heart defect? Am I going to be alive in a few months? Is this something that's going to ruin my life, or severely impact my life if I don't die? Because that was like probably the scariest moment of the whole thing, was just not knowing what was going on. I remember very keenly talking to my parents, right before going into surgery. I remember looking over to them, and I remember telling them, that, excuse me. I remember telling them that no matter what happens, that I will always love them. And it's, and my mother kind of chuckled, and she's like, well, why are you saying this? And I told her I don't know. And truth be told, at the time, I didn't know. It took me years to realize why I had said that. And what had happened is that I had realized that I didn't get it. I didn't get the chance to say goodbye to my family, and I didn't want to miss that chance again. So my mom at this point was obviously very confused as to what was going on. She's over in Nebraska, helping out with the funeral preparations and everything, and they're still trying to stabilize me while they wait for an ambulance to arrive. And a second shot gets delivered to my heart, again trying to restart it, to get it out of asystole. The ambulance finally arrives, and I'm taken to a hospital. My father rides with me in the ambulance. My brother, sister, and now sister-in-law ride a taxi to a nearby, I think it was a motel. They managed to stabilize me in the ICU, but I was placed under a medically induced coma for 3 days. It's weird. Like, if you've ever been into surgery, you'll know that, like, when you get out of, anesthesia, it's like waking up very groggy in the morning. You're very quick to jump back on. But when you're in a medically induced coma, you don't, for me, I didn't have anything. It was very slow start to waking up. Now, according to my mother, they were absolutely terrified at the time, because when they finally woke me up 3 days later, they didn't know what they would find. They didn't know if I had oxygen deprivation to the brain and I was going to be brain damaged, or if I was, if there was like something wrong with me, mentally as a result from complications of the cardiac arrest. They didn't know what was going to happen. But according to my mother, and I love this part of the story, the first words out of my mouth were bullshit. And that's when they realized that I was going to be all right. And slowly, throughout the day, I started to become more and more aware. I had, apparently I was constantly asking them what happened, what's going on, why am I here, and then I asked that several times. And I don't really remember any of that. The first time I remembered what they told me had happened, the first thought that came to my mind was, oh, thank God my computer's all right, because I was on my laptop at the time. But yeah, so we waited there for a few days and afterwards, and they're trying to figure out what exactly was wrong with me. They had done CT scans and MRIs and stuff like that, blood work, all that. And they walked back in and they said, we don't know what's wrong with you, so we're just going to discharge you. And about 5 minutes later, my cardiologist stormed into my room and had told them, we are not releasing this guy. A healthy 20-year-old kid does not have a cardiac arrest for no reason. We are ill-equipped to deal with this. We're going to send him to another hospital. And I was optimistic that I'd be able to just go into a car and then go to a hospital, but they put me into an ambulance again and sent me off to actually the same hospital that I think it was Jimmy Carter got his heart surgery done at. So they were really prepared. So they come in and they say, we still don't know what's wrong with you, and we think that the best course of option is to have an SICD in place, implanted into you. An SICD stands for subcutaneous implantable cardiac defibrillator. And what it is it's a defibrillator that's implanted into my chest. And they wheeled me in, they put the anesthesia on, they injected me with anesthesia and, I went under, and they implanted the defibrillator on me, which is the first time I had ever gone into surgery. So it was an interesting experience. I remember getting out of it and just being in a whole world of pain because they had ripped open my chest muscles and shoved a box into it and fed a wire underneath my pectoral muscle and up my sternum. So it was not very comfortable. During this entire time, anytime I would sit up or get out of bed and move, it would raise alarms and the nurses would come rushing into the room to make sure I'm all right because my heart rate would spike up a bit. It was still recovering at this time because it had just suffered a traumatic event. One of the things that really kept me going through the entire thing was just humor. I remember talking to my friends at the time. They'd bust my balls about about always saying that I was getting like a Pikachu upgrade because I got like a defibrillator implanted in me, and that's something that like people like ask too. Is like, what's it like getting shocked by a defibrillator? What's it like getting shocked by it? And it's not very comfortable. And I remember absolutely hating Atlanta roads because they had put the thing in, stitched me up, and then said, all right, you can leave the hospital in like a few hours. So that was very exciting leaving. But I remember hating Atlanta roads because every single goddamn bump on those roads I felt with immense pain on the way back home on the 4-hour drive. It sucked. But got home safe and sound and was very happy to be home. The first night that I spent at home too, I slept downstairs because I didn't want to like go up the stairs because moving hurt at the time. So I want to minimize that. And I also couldn't like lay down on my back because if I sitting back up, that's caused a lot of stress in my chest, which in turn also hurt because of the surgery. So I slept downstairs on the chair, and the first night I actually had like, God, I think it was like my first nightmare that I had in like 10 years at that time. I remember like screaming, waking up screaming, yelling dad. Fortunately my dad was like sleeping downstairs with me. He's like, is everything all right, man? Yeah, fortunately it was. But I forgot to mention this, like the worst thing about being in a hospital for like a prolonged period of time is that I wasn't able to like get into the shower because I had a whole bunch of like shit hooked up to me and like all that. The best that I got was like a dry bath where like they had wipes and soap and stuff like that I had to do that, and that sucked. But for like 10 days, I was laying in the same clothes and basically my own filth, and it was fucking horrible. I remember, like, when I got home, one of the very first things I did was go into the shower, and I couldn't get it above the chest because if the water had hit the wound, it could get it could get infected. It can mess up the stitching. It can do like a whole bunch of stuff. So it's no water above the chest, but like chest down. Oh my! It was the best goddamn feeling that I had ever felt. It was amazing. I was so happy. Like I was like the happiest that I had been at that entire time was just getting into the shower. Yeah, I remember the day after that too. My brother had got home, and he's very happy to see me, and he immediately walks up to give me a hug, and he's pretty gentle with the hug. I'm sure he wanted to hug harder, but it still hurt a little bit. And I remember like when he hugged me, it went, I kind of like tensed up because it was still sore. And my brother was very upset about this. He actually ended up walking into the garage and punching the freezer. And I think it was because when we were growing up, he had spent so much time sort of with the protective brother mindset, and in that instance he couldn't protect me, he couldn't help me, he couldn't do anything for me. He could just like support me, and when he tried to like support me and hug me, he ended up hurting me, and he got very upset about that. I remember feeling very, very upset because I had known that everyone was thinking about me at the time, and I didn't like that. I wanted this to be a time where people focused on my grandmother who had just passed away in her life, and I felt guilty at the time. I didn't quite understand like why. I just knew that I felt guilty that people were talking about me or thinking about me and checking up on me instead of focusing on her, and that really upset me. The main thing that I took away from this entire experience is that so many people tell you to cherish what you have. And we all kind of get that, you know, don't take for granted everything can be taken from you the next day. But what no one ever told me or explained to me was that you should always let those that you love know how much you love them, because you don't know when the last time they'll see you is. That's something that I try and operate off of now. I always try and be as kind as I can. When I was younger, I struggled a lot with anger management and mental health issues and stuff like that. And a lot of what I've gone through with that, put things into perspective for me, and that I can't really take what I have for granted. I need to show nothing but love to those that I love. And I try and do that every day. I've since moved out of my parents' house. But every week I still drive on to down to their house and eat dinner with them. Because I love them. And I want to spend as much time as I can with them. Because I still don't know. I still don't know when the last time I've seen them is. Because we never really did get an answer as to what caused the cardiac arrest.
If you want to help support the channel, then please consider subscribing. It only takes 1 second and it really does help a lot. And if you enjoyed this video, then maybe leave a like and a comment. If you'd like to be a part of my community, you should join the Discord and follow me on Twitter. Links are down in the description below.